don't feel like an outsider. The reason I say that is due to the different strands of my life, I've always felt like an outsider, right? Well, growing up, and that's I think what held me back a lot. I was always either ethnic minority, religious minority, or just a guy who from the Middle East in Europe, or like I was the youngest guy in my class, etc. And I just felt like an outsider. And the moment that my mind switched to like I'm not an outsider, I belong where I am right now because I made it here on my own. Um, made That's when I felt like the best of me came out.
Welcome to Extraordinary Stories. I'm your host, Forbes Shannon. And with me today, the extraordinary stories just have been appearing in my life in the most random places, in ways where I could explain how I met somebody and nobody would believe it. This is a guy who you've accomplished so much. You've traveled, you've lived so many places, and really you're an awesome friend. And it's been really cool learning from you what chasing your purpose feels like. The one and only Lawan Hawizy.
Thank you for having me, man.
Hey, man. Thanks for being here.
No, and everything you said about being a good friend, and that's where this all comes from. It just builds off of our very first interaction.
Yeah. Well, let's just get right into it, dude. All right. So,
Yeah.
for some context for our listeners, Lawan and I both live currently in the downtown Phoenix neighborhood.
Yep.
They call it Roosevelt Row.
Yeah.
And, I guess before you tell the story of how we first met,
Hmm.
it's when I was trying to introduce you to my other friends, you and the other guys, and we'll get into that in a second. I was like trying to figure out how to label it.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. They're like my neighbors. They're guys I see. And then I
Yeah.
was like, what am I talking about? They're my friends.
Yeah.
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 So, Santana and I both nominated you. So, how do you know me?
So the way I know you is that, again, as you mentioned, we live in the same neighborhood, and I just happened to be in a bar called Greenwood, and there's a common friend of ours that was there called Steven,
Uh-huh.
who comes in and he sees you come in, and then I remember you came in, you had your little book with you, you're right, and you went to the bathroom, and then Steven was like, "Oh, by the way, this guy's a writer." And the problem with me with anyone that I meet in the creative arts is that like I would get a bit cynical and like so as soon as you came back, I'm like, "So would you write for? What did you do?"
Uh-huh.
etc. And then you kind of like blew my mind with what it is that you did, but in your very like Forbesy way, I guess. And I don't know, there was an instant connection, and especially because I think you just come back from a trip and you were kind of almost scripting like a comic bit from that trip.
Yeah.
And you held my attention the entire time, and it was worth from start to finish worth the payoff. And we just kept we just like instantly clicked that day, and then we just kept we kept the drinks going,
Hmm.
and then we ended up at a different bar in the neighborhood, and this time the group of us grew from like three to I think it was five people at the end,
Yeah.
and then off the cuff I'd mentioned a story about a previous employer, and you instantly came in like I don't even think I was directing the conversation to you, but you instantly came in and talked about the line of work that I was in, and I was like, no, you don't know that company. It was only like 30 people, and he goes, and then sorry, you go, um, well, do you know what my last name is? And I was like, I only just about remember your first name, and you said Shannon, and I was like, that that can't be that can't be you, because I did work with someone whose last name was Shannon, and the first thought that came to my head again, because the alcohol was like, shouldn't you be eight?
Yeah.
And that's when you told me, oh, you know about my secret family. And my response was, well, in my life, you were the secret family because you were the person that he wasn't talking about. So, long story short, it turns out I did work with his dad,
Hmm.
and
From so long ago and so far away.
yeah, and this is like, there's no way our worlds would have meshed. This is when I was living in the Bay Area. This is when I first moved to the U.S. I hadn't even, perfectly honest, I hadn't even thought about your dad
Yeah.
from the moment I left that company, which was in 2018,
Yeah.
up until that moment in the summer of last year.
Yeah, and the joke around that is that my dad went and he has another family that he takes care of, and it was so funny that because I have a younger brother, right, who
Yeah.
is 8,
Yes.
right, and you were like, I remember that, and I was like, yeah, no, there was one before that,
Yeah.
and it blew my mind. Like, I think of connections like that, where it's like, that was like a 20-person company or
Yeah,
something, and the fact that you would have worked with my dad, it was like, "Yo, dude, like, what like, how did that happen that 2 of us would just meet in a Phoenix bar?"
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And, that was when I decided for better or worse that you were just gonna be my friend,
yeah.
right? Well, you were gonna be my neighbor first, and then
Exactly. Yeah,
then you were
yeah,
gonna be my friend, yeah.
yeah. And the thing was like what we didn't instantly like we didn't click that night, but what I saw on that night was like you processing what I'd said, and you processed it by drinking more and then going to play hockey. And I decided I was going to watch you play hockey, where you spent 90% of the game in the penalty box because you kept intentionally fouling out because you were so drunk. But then that wasn't like at that point. Then we became really good friends. It still built off of that, and then I would
Yeah.
randomly find you in the neighborhood, and then
Mhm.
there were times where I'd see you and I was with some people and I'd bring you over and vice versa. And then it just kind of built from there. And then I genuinely,
And then
I,
it was like, I should get this guy's number. Like,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
know?
Because I don't think we ever exchanged numbers up until like 3 or 4 months later.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I wanna talk about that for a little
Yeah.
bit, and then we'll kinda segue into the project you're working on,
Yeah.
but friendship is difficult when you get old. At least that's
Yeah.
kind of my thesis. I don't know
Mhm.
how you feel.
So it is really difficult because the thing is when you grow up, you're always put in scenarios where you are with similar people. So whether you're in school, whether you're in university, or whether first job out of college, but then the older that you get, especially at my age, in my early 40s, I'd moved to Phoenix because I was in a relationship, and then the relationship ended.
Mhm,
And at 41 in a city that predominantly kind of leans more towards younger couples, people doing the burb life early,
mhm.
it's just, I kind of went from easily making friends and living in cities that had more, transplant people like myself, to a scenario where I, was basically I was trying really hard to make friends to the point I just started, closing off people. So there's
Uh,
people that, for example, like the likes of we would talk about like Jake or
mhm.
yourself or Santana. It took me a while to acknowledge people as friends
Yeah,
because
right.
the amount of times like people would say like, "Oh, this is my friend Lawan," and I'd say like, "Oh, well, I know Jake because we both have dogs," you know.
Yeah, right.
And then it's kind of taught me that it's
"Oh, wait, Jake is my friend." Yeah,
exactly,
right,
yeah,
uh-huh, yeah. So, with that, you one thing that I really admire about you is how you really live into like purpose and passion,
yeah,
and like you have these different hobbies and interests and work, but like you are a guy that goes all in, and so you're working on a project where you're going all in on,
yeah.
and you've included me in the process, and it's been really fun to watch you work. Tell our listeners what you're working on.
So I mean, the the thing that I've always had in my life is that I've always been jealous of the creative people because I didn't grow up in a society that encouraged that. So you had to go into STEM, you had to go into this, and I kind of played by the rules up for that point. So whenever I see anyone that's creative, either artistically or musically, or just has a way with words, I just thought that was never my life. And so most of my life, I get the thing of like, oh, dude, your life's interesting or you're funny, etc. You should talk about it. And I never took the leap. And there was a period in 2015 where I kind of did stand up for like 3 months, and then
Uh-huh.
I just didn't. I think I appreciate a more of a collaborative experience because being a stand up, as you would know, is like it's a very lone
Yeah,
experience. You have to really be self disciplined. You have to really put yourself out there and make
yeah.
yourself vulnerable. I'm not used to that. But then it's a random conversation, a couple of weeks ago by the pool turns into this concept of a show we could be writing. And then I've never thought this is something that I could do. But then you basically sat me down with Final Draft on a laptop.
I was just trying to watch Michigan win the
Yeah,
Final Four.
which they
Yeah.
did. um, well, my bracket, but it was just sitting there, and then you gave me your headphones, and I just started writing. And there was this sense of purpose that I didn't think I'd had up until that point because it all everything just kind of fell into place. Like I'm not going to pretend I'm this amazing screenwriter. I'm not going to pretend that I already have it figured out. But this is the type of stuff that I could see myself pouring hours and hours and hours into. And just for example, like yesterday, I just sat somewhere, and next thing I know, 6 to 7 hours later, I'm still sat there. and the only thing that I remembered was I need to go walk my dog.
Yeah.
This is the type of I've never had that. Like, I'm an avid book reader. I'm very I try and be as active as I can, play video games, etc. I've never been in a scenario where I completely lose track of time like that. And this is where your help coming in. There's a couple other people involved, and it's been eye opening. And I know there's going to be pains along the way, but it's pains that I am looking forward to working through, and just treating this as a new avenue, because it's not just this one project that we're working on. I already have a couple other things in my
That's
mind that I
cool.
kind of want to split out into.
Mhm.
So it's just been and you're the one that kind of pushed me to do that, and has made me think that the cynic in me is always like, why didn't I do this earlier?
Yeah.
But I guess better late than never.
Well, it was almost a repeat moment, um, where when I first it was like, I don't know, the 4th or 5th time
Hmm.
I was working with Rob Schneider,
Yeah.
and he had a script that he wanted me to look at, and we were writing something totally different.
Hmm.
And he sends it to me, and it's a final draft document, and I don't have this software Final Draft, which
Hmm.
is, that's where Rob said, it's like Microsoft Word for screenwriting. He's like, "I thought you were a screenwriter?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." And the funny thing is, like, after I showed that to you, I was like, "Yeah, it's Final Draft. It's like Microsoft Word. I thought you were a screenwriter." And then, at the table right there, you bought a laptop,
Yeah.
because you only had a work one. You
Yeah.
bought a laptop, you bought Final Draft, and then you sent me the picture as soon as the laptop came. You're
Yep.
like, "I'm ready to go."
I'm ready to, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's like, I've if you would have told me like a day prior that I was going to buy a new laptop, that was never even in my sphere. But as soon as I sat down and I felt that passion like overtake me, I was like, I can't let this just be a one-off thing.
Mhm.
And there's always like, you chase that high, etc. But that writing experience that we had that day, it's
Mhm.
happened every other day since I've done it.
That's
So
awesome.
so it's not like one of those where it's like you keep chasing that high. It's I get full, like I went to bed last night fulfilled, after having done that 6 or 7 hours of work, which, work doesn't satisfy that,
Mhm.
scratch. A good workout could potentially, but only for like, it's not a consistent feeling. And I just went into bed in a good type of exhaustion.
Mm. Have you found that in the morning, you have a different outlook on your day?
Yes.
Yeah? How so?
So I'm pretty regimented because I work from home. I work, pretty early hours. So my day is always pretty, split up into like, this is, point A to point B, I'm doing this, point B, I'm doing this, etc. And I'll go work out, I'll read at this point. But then I do have like these set of hours now that what do I do in these couple hours? Do I play video games? Do I doom scroll? Do I
Yeah.
watch a TV show? And none of those things are things that I'm overtly passionate about. So when I wake up during the day, like for example today, I will, once I'm done here, I go back to work, I'll go work out, and then I'm like, well, this evening's free now, I want to write.
Yeah.
So
For sure. I, it was the funniest thing. I found that Friday night, when I'm in the flow of something,
yeah.
for example, right now it's podcasting,
Yeah.
I look forward to Friday night because I still associate Friday night with me time,
Hmm.
and it's now a different me time.
Yes.
It's not going out. It's not, any of the other things that it used to be. It's like, I don't know how to explain to people, like, I can't wait to order a pizza
Mhm.
and sit by myself
Yeah.
and work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but
Like,
it's not work.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, if I can be vulnerable for a second, that's always been a crux in all of my, intimate
Yeah.
relationships, is that I work too much.
Mhm.
And I say the exact same thing. It's not work. It's how, I don't know, like, how would you tell someone, I'm asking you this, how would you tell someone that your passion is more exciting than their presence?
Oof. Well, this is still pretty new for me, so I don't know if I've got the verbiage for it, because the I can imagine that a buddy could call me up tonight. It doesn't
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be an intimate relationship. A buddy could call me up tonight like, "Hey, do you want to grab some beers?" And tonight will be a night where I'll be like, "Actually, no, I don't want to, because I want to sit down and I have so many things in my head right now that I want to put to paper."
Yeah.
I think I guess this conversation that I'm probably going to have a lot
Mhm.
moving forward. So
Yeah.
I don't have the words for that right now.
Yeah. I think, I think the other thing, right? Like, I see it all the time in, like, the hustle culture.
Yeah.
disappear,
Mhm.
work on yourself. And they make it sound like it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah,
And it's
it's
like,
like a
dude, no.
sacrifice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not sacrifice to
No.
me.
No, I think if you've got that, I think, almost like the regimented life that I was building up to this, it's not like I was like this always. I was a pretty, I was pretty say reckless, but I was always kind of living by the moment, etc. Until I think until I moved to the US, until I started working for the company that your dad worked for.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been basically permanently working from home since 2013, and that's not an easy shift to do. But I think those whatever 13 years of working from home has given me the opportunity to regiment my life so that I can now build space for what I want to passionately do now without it having to seem like I'm sacrificing something or I'm burning bridges or I'm completely eliminating myself from, other people in my life.
W What about your childhood made creativity feel stifled?
So my my background is my ethnicity is Kurdish. And so for the people that don't know, Kurdistan is it's this region in the Middle East. It's not a country. After World War One, they split up our region into five different countries: Iraq, Iran, Syria, Turkey, Armenia. Not the most. Let's just say it's a volatile set of countries. I come from the Iraqi side, and not I don't have a sob story or anything like that. My parents escaped in the 70s, and I moved to the UK. They moved to the UK. That's where I was born. But I was only about a year old before they moved to Dubai because my dad was a civil engineer. So I grew up in still I was a an ethnic minority within the Middle East as well. So I was always the outcast, let alone being ginger.
Right.
I was I was in a predominantly Arab society where I was not an Arab. I was, it's an Islamic society, but my family's not particularly religious. So the concept was to fit in, just fit in, try and make the least amount of noise because you don't want to get picked on for being this or for being that. And in itself, the Dubai that I grew up in isn't the Dubai that it is now. The Dubai in the 80s and 90s was slightly less vapid, less, trying to appeal to the Western world than it is now, where it's gone to the other side of the spectrum, where it's gone too far, I think. But um, at school, for example, we never had arts classes, we never had music classes, we never had.
Wow.
We'd seen poetry as like, oh, this is what, something that Shakespeare wrote, or some famous Arab poets, etc. It was very heavily concentrated on. There was no time for anything like. I can't remember, like I can't believe the workload that I had at school because it didn't leave you time for anything else. So the only time it left me for was, maybe playing some sports. But the rest of it was just, you know, 15 final exams. I had to take 15 course classes, and I couldn't pick and choose. I had to do like really hard Arabic or Islamic education at the same time, doing physics, trigonometry, maths, and the societal pressure is you have to go into that. So I went into engineering,
Uh-huh.
moved to the UK, which is a big culture shock from having. Yes, I was born there, but I was only there for a year. But then I moved to the north of Scotland
Oh, wow.
for university, where I went from a conservative Middle Eastern society to whatever Scotland is. and but it was great. Like it was like very informative, but at the same time, I was also quite young when I went to university. I was 16.
What?
Yeah. I finished high school at 15 years and 11 months,
Wow.
because I got pushed up a few years earlier in my life, because I have an older sister. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, but I have an older sister. So when she came back from school, she would want to tell my parents what she learned at school, but my parents were both working parents, so they had no time. So she just taught me everything. So when I went to school, already I knew the alphabet, I knew shapes, colors, etc. So they moved me from kindergarten one to grade one immediately. I was like 3 or 4 years old at grade one.
Wow.
But so going back to like being at university at 16, I while 16 to 18 isn't that much of an age gap, it's a huge age gap emotionally, and
Yeah.
especially someone who was emotionally stunted and like the background that I grew up in, I kind of retreated more into my shell. And it wasn't my friends from Aberdeen, Scotland, who are still my friends to this day, that took me out of it. But then I did engineering there and I didn't want to fail. So again, there wasn't really an avenue for doing anything creatively. And, but those have been the things that have stifled it. But also I feel like that's what I can lean on now to be, well, my story's a bit interesting.
So, I guess how did you get past that, like, emotional stunting that arrested development? Because you meeting you, I don't know, what, 15 years later or
Yeah.
whatever, like, there's no way that this guy's would ever have been emotionally stunted.
I would say what really helped is a lot of the patience of my friends because a lot of people really took me in because again, as a Middle Eastern guy who moved to the Western world, we got told, watch out, they're bullies, they're racists, they're etc. I'm not saying they don't exist, but they didn't exist in my world. They saw something unique in me, and were
Yeah,
willing to let me grow, and they're willing to let me make mistakes where I would have moments of weakness, or I would have moments where I was just like lashing out because I didn't understand what was going on. And I was kind of used to, if you lash out or if you show a moment of weakness, that's it. The- you're done with these people. But these people just stayed with me, and if nothing more, got even closer and kind of pushed me up. And I think it was, slowly getting that helped me slowly get out of my shell. And then whenever I took a risk, I saw it succeeding. So when I finished my undergrad, I applied for a scholarship to get my postgrad in a city called Newcastle in England. There was a very low chance I was going to get it. I got it.
wow.
I completed my master's program, um, and then worked. I applied for IBM UK as for the graduate program. Again, the percentage of getting in was pretty low. Got it. So
Okay.
each one of those things, even though it was like more in the corporate space or in the you know following the right things to do according to my society, those things helped me open up. So then this the kid who grew up in the Middle East is now working and living in central London.
Yeah, right.
And then I see a lot of people who got into the same spot as I am through different ways, and we're no different to each other. And that's what helped. And then eventually coming to the US, and it's the company that your dad worked for brought me over. Again, I was on a resort vacation in Tunisia,
Yeah.
and I saw this job offer opening, and I applied via email on my phone back when it wasn't easy to write an email on the phone.
Yeah.
And I remember the HR person responding and like trying to schedule a meeting for me on that day, and I was like, "I'm actually on vacation," and so it's just these. It's just me seeing things, taking a risk, and then it working. But then me also not consciously knowing that because I wish I was more of a risk taker.
That's fascinating. So you find yourself not to be a risk taker
Yeah.
when your whole life has been built on risk.
Yes. And I find that incredibly, it's something that I've been battling with because whenever I see people who I deem to be risk takers, right, are people who, really put themselves out there and willing to be, torn down. Whereas I feel like my stuff is very like, oh, okay, if this doesn't work out, no one knows, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how I deem that. But, when looking back at my life, if you told me when I was this kind of bullied kid back home to where I am now with the places that I've lived in, three continents. I've lived in five different countries. I've lived in, I don't know, five, six states so far in the US. I've lived a very, very fulfilling life.
What do you think the younger version of you would think of your life right now? Like if you could talk to him?
You would think my life is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, like, probably wouldn't even believe we're the same person.
Uh,
It's just um, what I've achieved, the way that I've worked on myself more than anything else, whether it's, physically or mentally, because I think therapy has been a big help for me. And one of the things that like I would have never even thought about, let alone back home when I was in the Middle East 10 years ago, I wouldn't have
no,
thought about
therapy's
it.
not big in the Middle East.
We don't even acknowledge mental health. We don't even think it's a thing. We just put everyone that has a slight problem in a basket and go, oh, they're part of that group.
Is it possible that you have taken so much risk that you don't even see risk and you're like looking for the next level of risk? You say you're not a risk
Yeah.
taker, but is it possible that you're actually almost dumb?
That could be true, because I always, the way that I would look at, when I was setting tasks for myself in life, like I did remember when I was, growing up as a kid, I was like, oh, it'd be great if I lived in the UK because I was very UK centric when it came to like music, sports, etc. I got to the UK and I was like, well, it'd be cool if I lived in London, and then moved to London, and then I was like, oh, it'd be cool if I could, have enough money where I could go and watch my team Manchester United. I got season tickets for that. Then while I was in London, I was like, "Man, I'd love to move to the US." Move to the US, move to the East Coast, and I was like, "You know what? I would really love to live in San Francisco."
Uh-huh.
And then through that company, moved to San Francisco. And then, like, I'm in this space right now where I think it was very geographic with my risk taking. I feel like I reached the apex of that, you know? There is a, part of me that's, like, scratching right now because 'cause I've been in Phoenix for 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
It's like, not really a warm climate person. I could move to Chicago. Like that's but that it's not going to get beyond that. I would like to kind of apply that risk taking elsewhere. I'd like to apply that risk taking into the project that we're working on right now,
Screenwriting, yeah.
screenwriting, or maybe go back into the comedy world.
Mhm.
Like maybe not as a stand up, but maybe as like I don't know, just doing something in that space. And I think I sit too much on my laurels and going like, well, I'm 41. I'm going to be 42 soon. What's the point in doing that? And I
Uh,
wish I was, I wish in that aspect, especially chasing something even remotely creative, I wish I was kind of more of a risk taker in the past.
well, the interesting thing, I'm not sure if you're aware of this pattern, is right before you explained all of these risks, the same word that you said was love.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
what role does love have in your life?
So
Man,
I,
I'd really love to do this. I'd really love to do this.
yeah,
I'd really love to do this. And then you did them all.
yeah.
So, what is the connection between love and those things?
Well, I don't think I would risk anything if there wasn't a love or a passion for it. So I think that is a nice, a really good way of reframing it. And it's kind of blowing my mind right now. So, yeah, I think it's just, it's a thing that I need to that's this whole working on myself, especially mental health wise and trying to reframes. And that's a big thing my therapist is always talking about. Reframe how
Yeah.
you see this, reframe how you look back at certain situations, etc. But also putting it towards things that I'm working on, I think is
Mhm.
a great way of doing it.
So, um, I guess my next question for you is what is it that you're curious about?
I'm curious to see, especially in this collaborative work that we're doing right now, is what comes of it. Like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. I'm going in with the intention of this is going to be a success.
So do you have an outcome attached to it currently?
I have an outcome attached to it.
Yeah, what is it?
I think. Well, sorry, my outcome is this is going to be a hit show.
Okay.
But I'm curious. The curiosity comes in as to what happens from here to there.
Well, let me ask you, what do you as a person look like when it's a hit show? Like where do you live? What do you wear? How do you spend your day?
Okay, I would just I would be living in I guess, a more TV centric place. It could be a New York or an LA. I would be a more mentally fulfilled person, I think, because there's a lot of true us in
Uh-huh.
in this show that we're writing. So I think it's going to be cathartic. It's going to be therapeutic. It's going to grow me as a person. What the person that I am is not going to be too dissimilar to the person that I am currently. Maybe a bit more proud of myself and the achievements that I've done. To pivot from doing all the right things that I wanted to do for my society to like doing something completely different. You know, and yeah, like what I'd be wearing, those type of things is like I'm a pretty minimalistic person.
Yeah.
I don't think my life would be that different to what I am right now. I just think it's going to be surrounded by people that inspire me,
Mhm.
and which I already am. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's going to be a much more, my day is going to be more filled with activities that then nurture this passion that I have right now.
Do you believe in the idea of destiny or fate?
I mean, I think so. I mean, how we met,
Yeah,
like
right.
that's how you can't script
You
that.
can't write that shit.
You can't. I mean, we could write until the end of time and this wouldn't happen and no one would believe it.
Yeah, right.
I absolutely do. Yeah.
Uh, okay. Um, something that is a frame in my life
Mhm.
is I like to think that I collect people.
Okay.
Like I have a collection of people that have shaped me in some way or another. And uh like they're almost like all my essays are about somebody, right? And so it's almost like I'm like immortalizing the person in the essay.
Yeah.
And I can look back at this collection of people, you know. So if you were to adopt that mentality, who is the person you're going to collect next?
Very good question. The thing is I don't seek out a specific type of person to collect because I've seen your writing process. I've seen you like where you wrote about Jake and I, for
Yeah.
example, right? And
Yeah.
you showed it to us. Because like this, yeah, I don't know what type of person. I think I don't know because all my friends in my life, with each stage of my life, has been a completely different type of person that I would never have anticipated would be close friends with. Whereas, back I think when I was, let's say like when we're in these structured environments, we find similar interest people. But the older that we grow, we
Yeah.
kind of become a bit more selective. But I feel like I've gone past the selective, and now I want to connect with people on a more mental level. Like, you don't have to align with me on everything that like ethical values, political
Yeah.
leanings, etc. I think it's people that are mature enough to know that we have maybe conflicts on that, but are willing to still you know enhance my life,
Yeah. So
enhance each other's
it's
lives.
almost like it's predetermined and they will show up.
Well, there's parts of it like that, but for example, like our meeting, right?
Yeah.
It seems like fate,
Yeah.
but then we both worked to make sure we became friends after that.
Yeah, right.
So it's not, you know, there's always this like kind of this dramatic flourish of like when you meet the girl that you love, it just happens,
Yeah.
right? And it could, that does. I think the initial interaction is that, but unless you work for it, I don't think it's unless both sides work for it and really want it to happen, then that initial meeting could just be deemed as like just a coincidence as
Yeah.
opposed to fate.
Right. So I ask everybody this question that comes on Extraordinary Stories. If there was one piece of advice that you could give our listeners that they could act on today to live more extraordinarily, what would it be?
Don't feel like an outsider. The reason I say that is due to the different strands of my life, I've always felt like an outsider, right? Well, growing up, and that's I think what held me back a lot. I was always either ethnic minority, religious minority, or just a guy who from the Middle East in Europe, where like I was the youngest guy in my class, etc. And I just felt like an outsider. And the moment that my mind switched to like I'm not an outsider, I belong where I am right now because I made it here on my own. Um, that's when I felt like the best of me came out. So that's what I would say.
You can read more about Lawan at joinextraordinary.com. That's joinextraordinary.com and at joinextraordinary on all of our socials. I'm Forbes Shannon.
And I'm Lawan Hawizy.
That was fun, dude.
Take care.